chapter on psychological disorders.
Yay!
I didn't leave so wait for it.
You get to study all the
I'm schizophrenic.
different disorders out there. So turn to page 353.
And math is what they did today. The lab, yeah. I'm doing it in physics now. Just putting aside so that looks like I have something.
This is pretty much the worst video I've ever made. Dude, are you kidding me?
All right, how do you know if you have a psychological disorder?
You go to a doctor.
Well, there's kind of a checklist. And can we pull the back blinds open just a little bit so we can get a little more light here? Thank you. Eli, you're just visiting?
You know I missed this class.
Haven't you already done this class?
Yeah.
You even took the AP exam.
Yeah. Well, that's my cue to leave, guys.
No, it's not. Say it.
You can stay. Yeah? You don't want to audit the class?
Yeah.
You know, you could teach this stuff. Okay, so what's wrong with you if you have if you're considered to have a professionally diagnosed mental disorder? Then one, it's a violation. You have a violation of cultural standards. Cultural standards are how you're expected to act in your culture. Like, for instance, it's expected that you don't go walking around naked in the park in our culture.
Oh.
You might do that in an African culture or something where they don't wear much clothes, but here you don't do that. So a guy walking around in the park with no pants on, he might have a mental disorder. Normally, you don't get in an elevator and start talking real loudly when there's a bunch of people in there. Someone who does that, they might have a mental disorder. Or a psychological disorder is what we should call it. The disorder might be maladaptive or harmful. This is, you might have some behavior that is harmful either to yourself or to others. If you're harming others, that could be you could have a psychological disorder. Or if you're harming yourself. Mental disorder as emotional distress. You might just have anxiety, stress, depression, something wrong with your emotions. You might be sad all the time. You might be happy all the time. Believe it or not, being real happy all the time could be a psychological disorder. That might be one that you want to have. But it's...
Are there people who have that?
I guess it's possible.
I don't want it.
So they kind of put all this together to say a mental disorder is any behavior or emotional state that causes an individual great suffering or worry, is self-defeating or self-destructive, or is maladaptive and disrupts the person's relationships or the larger community. That's the definition of a mental disorder. And it's a pretty big, broad definition. So what scientists have done is they have gotten together.
I have your DSM.
Oh, you have the DSM?
Yeah.
I was going to show that. Thank you. They've gotten together and wrote a book that tells you all the mental disorders. And if you ever have time and you want to look at it, feel free. I got it sitting in the bookcase over there. As long as you don't steal it.
Eliza.
Read it, put it back. No, Eliza, you can feel free to look at it. They name the name of the disorder, and they describe what it is that that is wrong with a person that has that disorder. Hello.
I
Living
brought-
organisms.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring them to you. So
Thank you. Yeah. Very nice. These are my mods.
You just have to pass them on.
Hello, Clarice. I really do have mods. If you ever saw Silence of the Lamb, he put mods.
Yeah.
This dead dump, this dead victim. Which I don't have tied up anywhere. Anyway, so speaking of mental disorders, you can look obsessive compulsive disorder. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
OCD.
What mental disorder?
Here it is. It talks about it right here. We're going to watch a video on OCD. Very interesting. Post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD.
What mental disorder did the guy in Silence of the Lambs have?
Which one? There were two of
That
them.
is
The dude who
a
said
that is
those
called
words The guy who's, I mean,
I just can't think of it.
You mean
It's
Buffalo
in here.
Bill?
skin suit.
It is a
That guy.
it is a antisocial.
Which is the worst?
We study it. That's the one. The antisocial personality disorder. That's a person with antisocial personality disorder. Those are the serial killers and such. Antisocial means they're against society. They don't follow the rules of society. They don't always end up serial killers, but most of those. And we'll watch a video on serial killers too. It's kind of scary. Anyway, let's talk about this DSM book first. The DSM, when it first came out in 1952, the first DSM-1 means the first issue, the first series of it. DSM-1 only had 100 disorders. DSM-4, is that this one?
What is
No, this is
DSM-4?
DSM-3. DSM-4 has 350 disorders, and I think they just came out with a new one very recently, a DSM-5. This is an older version. But anyway, you can see the number of mental disorders keep going up. Is that because there are new mental disorders out there, that some disease that people never had? It's probably because they are breaking things down into more categories. Like what they used to call schizophrenia, there might be several different types of it now. There are some things that used to not be recognized as a disorder, but are recognized now. And there is a lot more people going to see psychologists and psychiatrists, and so there are a lot more people being diagnosed with things. And so there's a rise in the number of diagnoses as well. Some say there is a confusion of serious mental disorders with just normal problems. Like one of the disorders in here is sleep disorder due to caffeine, something like that. And is that really a psychological disorder?
No.
If you just stop drinking caffeine, you ought to be okay. But so there are some things in here people argue shouldn't be in here. Now, how do you test someone to see if they have a mental disorder? Well, there are various types of tests you do. One type of test is called a projective test. Psychological tests used to infer a person's motives, conflicts, and unconscious dynamics on the basis of a person's interpretations of ambiguous stimuli. A projective test, you're trying to get the patient to project their thoughts to you, and from that projective test, figure out what's wrong with them. Have you ever heard of the Rorschach test?
Yes.
I'm going to give you the Rorschach test right now. What you're supposed to do when you take the Rorschach test is immediately write down or say, it's usually done verbally, you immediately say the first thing that comes to mind when you see the picture. Okay? But since we don't want everybody yelling stuff out at the same time, I'll have you just write it down. Jot down a few words or a sentence that the first thing that comes into your head when you see this picture. And what it is, it's an ink blot test. What they did was they poured ink on a sheet of paper, and they folded the paper in half, and then they unfolded the paper, and then they showed it to the patient. Okay? You ready for your Rorschach test? Don't think about it too much. Just look at it, and the first thing that pops into your mind. Paper. Well, you can't do it.
Right on that orange sheet.
Here we go. Just whatever pops into your head. Alright? Here comes the next one. You can just jot a couple words. Bam. What's just... what popped into your head? Alright, I can't give you too long for this. You just gotta do it quickly. You can't think about it too much. Here's the next one. These are from the real Rorschach test that some psychologists give. Shh. There's another one. Thank you. There's another one. Oh, that's it.
Oh boy.
Now, look at what you answered and see if there's a common thread that runs through them. This is what the psychologist tries to do. For instance, if you're saying, okay, that's penis. That reminds me of penis. And that's vagina. That's vagina there. And that is a bleeding anus. And if you get a common thread like that, you might have some sort of disorder. You see what I'm saying? Or you could say insect. And, ooh, that's a scary spider. That's a moth. Ooh, that's a bee that's coming to get me.
I actually have moth on mine twice.
Do you really?
And ox and clown.
Does anyone have devil?
I have
It's the devil.
I have an angry dragon.
I wrote guillotine with that one. I have really weird ones.
For the bleeding anus when I put it in.
If, for instance, you wrote guillotine, if, for instance, every one of yours is associated with death, maybe you have some sort of pathological...
It's a bow tie.
Yes.
The word that came
All of mine are living things.
What you get?
It's just weird.
I bet the was the first one.
Blasphemy.
Alright. So,
I got lady, penis, bug, lungs,
do
cow,
projective
and
tests...
demon.
This is psychodynamics. This is Freudian stuff where you're trying to get your subconscious to respond, and maybe your problems are in your subconscious. Do these projective tests work? A lot of study has been done that have been shown that projective tests are not very reliable and they're not very valid. They don't work very well. Different people. They might work a little bit for somebody. For some people who use them, and not at all for others. They're just not very reliable. So they rely more on objective tests. So we're going to do some objective tests that you can get off the internet to see if you have certain disorders. And what they are questionnaires or some sort of written response where you're asked on a scale of 1 to 10, something like, do you ever drink alone? Do you cry? How many times a day do you cry? And just asking you stuff like this. And after, they might ask 10 or 20 questions. It might be a whole battery of questions. And then they show you, after you take the test, they show you how to grade it. Or the computer, if you're doing it on a computer, will grade it for you. And it'll say you are not at all prone to depression, or you are might be slightly prone to depression, or your answers indicate that you might have depression, or you are definitely have depression. And then, they refer to you to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or something like that. So these are called inventories. And these are objective tests. Objective means it doesn't matter who's grading the test. It's like a true or false test or a multiple choice test is an example of an objective test. If I grade it or if Miss Bradford grades it, we're going to get the same result if it's completely objective. Objective tests seem to be a lot more reliable and more predictive of actual psychological difficulties than the projective tests, like the Rorschach ink blot. There's a personality test called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And that's a common personality test that is used. And you might have to take some type of personality test when you go off to college. What they do is they get you and they give you a personality test and they take your result and they place you with a roommate that has a similar personality. Because it's been shown that roommates who score similarly on these tests have fewer problems, report fewer problems with their roommate than people who score different on these personality tests. So a lot of colleges, to try and avoid all the problems of people wanting to get rid of their roommate, get another roommate, and switch, and that sort of thing, they give these tests to forego this. So have y'all, who are going to college, have y'all heard of this sort of thing? Are you going to have to take one? Do you know? Anyone? Yes? You're going to have to take one? Oh, you already did? Nice. They didn't do that when I was in college. They just threw you in with some guy. I got this real weird guy. I had to get out of there. Okay, so please read about the DSM and what disorders are and diagnosing disorders. You have to read through page 360. And the next time we'll talk about anxiety disorders. We just go through all the disorders one by one. Anxiety disorders, then mood disorders, then personality disorders, then drug abuse and addiction disorders, and dissociative identity disorder, that's like multiple personalities, and then schizophrenia. We do a day on each of these things. And so we'll have gone and we basically get an idea of what all the different psychological disorders are. And then the last chapter before you graduate is how to treat those disorders. What do we do to fix people who have problems? And so sometimes there's not much you can do, but sometimes there's a lot you can do. So that's the rest of the year for you guys. And then all the seniors are gone, and the rest of us finish the last couple chapters on our own.
Chapters are those?